My mother left me as an inheritance. A little girl told a millionaire, but when he saw what was inside, everyone was in shock. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story, and I want to get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain beat hard against the windshield of the silver Camry as William Thompson parked in front of the construction company's office in downtown Charlotte. At 52, the businessman, owner of a prosperous chain of building supply stores, adjusted the knot on his navy blue tie and sighed, watching the drops run down the glass. The meeting had been tense, suppliers pressing for payments, employees complaining about delayed wages. Business wasn't as good as it seemed. He got out of the car, protecting himself with a leather briefcase over his head, walking hurriedly along the wet sidewalk of Tryon Street. The downtown area was busy even with the rain, street vendors taking shelter under the awnings of commercial buildings, and the smell of hot dogs from a street cart mixed with the earthy scent of rain on hot asphalt, characteristic of rainy Carolina mornings. That was when a small figure appeared before him, half hidden behind a streetlight. A girl no more than 4 years old, her messy brown hair stuck to her face by the rain, wearing a faded pink dress and flip-flops that seemed too big for her little feet. Her large, dark eyes shone, with a mixture of fear and determination that made William stop instantly. "Mister," she said in a thin, trembling voice, "do you know how to read?" In her small, dirty hands, she held a crumpled piece of paper, protecting it against her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. William looked around for the child's parents, but the sidewalk was empty, except for a few passers-by rushing to take cover from the rain. "Where are your parents, little one?" "My mum went away 3 days ago," replied Sophie Grace, though William didn't know her name yet. "She left this for me, said it was very important, but I don't know how to read the letters." She held out the wet, yellowed paper with fingers that trembled, not just from the cold. William hesitated. His schedule was packed. He had 2 more meetings that morning, and Eleanor, his wife, was waiting for him at home for lunch. But something in the girl's eyes, an expression of desperation mixed with hope, struck a sensitive chord in his heart. He crouched down to her level and carefully took the document. The paper was damp and stained, but still legible. As his eyes scanned the typewritten lines, William felt his blood run cold. It was a property deed for a small house on the outskirts of Charlotte, registered in the name of Maria Miller, with a date of death from a week ago. The cause, complications from untreated pneumonia. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sophie. Sophie Grace. The lady at the hospital said my mommy became a star, but she lied because stars don't leave important papers." The childlike logic was both touching and devastating. William put the document in the inner pocket of his jacket, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had just accepted. "Sophie, do you have anyone else? Grandma, Grandpa, an aunt?" She shook her head negatively, raindrops flying from her wet hair. "I only had Mommy. She said if anything happened I should find a man in a suit and tie and ask him to read the paper. She said he would help me find my house." William's heart tightened. How could a child so young be alone in the world? And why had her mother instructed her to look specifically for someone like him? He looked at the deed again. The address was in the Belmont neighborhood, an area he knew well from supplying building materials for several renovations there. "Let's go there," he decided, surprising himself with his own determination. "Let's see this house your mother left for you." Sophie smiled for the first time, a shy but genuine smile that lit up her dirty little face. "Are you going to take me home?" "I am," William promised, extending his hand to her. "But first, let's get out of this rain." During the 15-minute drive to the Belmont neighborhood, Sophie remained silent in the back seat of the car, watching the city through the fogged window. William watched her in the rearview mirror, noticing how she wrung her hands in her lap, how she bit her lower lip when she got nervous, how her eyes followed every movement on the street, as if she were memorizing everything. The address led them to a dirt road, with simple brick houses interspersed with a few plywood shacks. The rain had formed puddles of mud that reflected the grey sky. Number 247 corresponded to a bare brick building, with peeling plaster and a rusty iron gate that creaked when opened. "This is it," Sophie murmured, her voice almost swallowed by the sound of the rain hitting the tin roof. "It's Mommy's house." William parked in front and observed the property with a heavy heart. The structure was visibly deteriorated. Cracked walls allowed moisture to penetrate, the roof had several broken shingles, and part of the plaster had fallen off, leaving the bricks exposed to the elements. It was hard to believe anyone had lived there recently. They walked to the main door, which was just ajar. William pushed it open slowly, and the creak of the hinges echoed through the silent interior. The smell of mold and dampness invaded his nostrils, mixed with a sickly sweet aroma he preferred not to identify. The house had only 3 rooms: a small living room with a partially collapsed ceiling, a tiny bedroom with a single bed covered in moldy sheets, and a kitchen where a few pots still sat on a 2-burner stove. It was a scene of neglect and poverty that contrasted sharply with the comfortable home where William lived with Eleanor. "Mommy kept the important things under the floor," Sophie said, heading to the bedroom. She said it was so no one would find them. William followed her, watching as the girl pointed to a specific area of the wooden floor. Some boards were slightly raised, as if they had been removed and replaced several times. He knelt and carefully lifted the planks, revealing a small metal safe hidden in the space between the beams. Sophie approached and, with the familiarity of someone who had done it before, turned a simple combination on the safe: 2804, her birth date. The mechanism clicked and the small door opened. What William saw inside left him in a state of complete shock. There was a considerable amount of cash, $20 and $50 bills, carefully organized in bundles held by rubber bands. But it wasn't just the money that surprised him. Along with the bills, there was a plastic folder containing documents, photographs, and a sealed letter with his own name written on the front. With trembling hands, he took the papers and began to examine their contents. The photographs showed a young brunette with sweet eyes next to a grey-haired man William recognized immediately. It was his own father, Samuel Thompson Sr., from a time when he was still alive and running the family business. But it was when he opened the first document that his reality began to crumble. It was an employment contract dated 20 years ago, stating that Maria Miller had been hired as a secretary at Thompson Construction from 2003 to 2007. William sat down heavily on the damp floor of the room, still processing the information. Sophie approached and touched his arm gently. "Are you okay? Did you know my mummy?" He looked into those innocent eyes and felt the world spin around him. How was it possible that fate had placed the daughter of a former family employee directly in his path? And what else would those documents reveal? William remained seated on the damp floor for several minutes, the documents trembling in his hands as he tried to process the magnitude of what he had discovered. Sophie watched him with childlike curiosity, occasionally touching his arm as if to console him, though she didn't understand what was happening. "My mommy worked with your daddy?" she asked, pointing to one of the photographs where Maria appeared smiling next to Samuel Thompson Sr. at the construction company's office. "It seems so," William murmured, his voice hoarse. He continued to examine the documents, finding pay stubs, work reports, and handwritten notes in a delicate female script. But it was when he opened the sealed letter with his name on it that his heart nearly stopped. The letter was written on company letterhead and dated just 2 months ago. The handwriting was the same as in the reports, clearly Maria's. Mr. William Thompson, if you are reading this letter, it means something has happened to me and my daughter Sophie has found her way to you, as I instructed. I know this may be a shock, but you need to know the truth about what happened between me and your family 20 years ago. I worked for your father from 2003 to 2007 as a secretary. During that time, I discovered irregularities in the contracts for several residential projects in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood. Entire families lost their savings due to questionable practices your father adopted to maximize profits. I documented everything, but I never had the courage to report it for fear of the consequences. When I left the company, I took these proofs with me. Your father found out and, well, let's just say I was persuaded to keep silent in ways I prefer not to detail in this letter. The money you found with these documents is not the product of blackmail, as you might be thinking. It is part of an inheritance I received from my Aunt Carol, who lived in Chicago and passed away last year. I specifically chose you because during the years I worked at the construction company, I observed your character. You were the only one in the family who questioned your father's decisions, who showed genuine concern for the clients. That is why I trust you will do what is right with Sophie and with the information I am giving you. William's hands trembled so much he had difficulty continuing to read. Sophie had sat down beside him on the floor and was playing silently with pieces of wood, creating small imaginary constructions. There is something else you need to know, Mr. Thompson. Sophie is not just an orphan child who needs help. She is. Well, you will find out for yourself when you are ready to face the whole truth about your family. For now, I only ask that you take care of her as if she were your own daughter. She is innocent of all the mistakes we adults have made in the past, with all my hope in your kindness, Maria Miller. William folded the letter carefully, his brain working furiously to understand the implications of what he had read. Irregularities at the construction company, victimized families, and what did Maria mean by Sophie is not just an orphan child? Sir, Sophie's small voice brought him back to reality. Can I get my things? I have a doll my mummy gave me. Of course, dear. William stood up, putting the documents in the inner pocket of his jacket. He watched Sophie go to a small cardboard box in the corner of the room, from which she pulled out a cloth doll with yellow yarn hair and a faded blue dress. This is Lucy, Sophie said, hugging the doll against her chest. Mommy said she would take care of me when I was alone. William's heart ached again. How could a mother prepare to leave such a young child alone in the world? What kind of threats had Maria faced to make such desperate decisions? Sophie, are you hungry? He asked, realizing it was past 2 in the afternoon and the girl probably hadn't eaten all day. A little, she admitted, touching her small belly, but there's no more food here. The lady at the market said she couldn't give us any more on a tab. The revelation that a 4-year-old child had gone hungry for the past few days made William feel a mixture of anger and compassion he had never experienced before. Let's get something to eat. Do you know a good place around here? Sophie's eyes lit up. There's Miss Rose's diner on the corner. She makes the best chicken and dumplings in Charlotte, but it's expensive, she added quickly, as if she had already learned to worry about money. They walked to the small family diner where William watched Sophie devour a plate of homemade food with the hunger of someone who didn't know when their next meal would be. Ms. Rose, a black woman in her 60s with a floral apron, recognized the girl immediately. Hi, Sophie. I've missed you these past few days. How's your mom? The innocent question made William choke on his soda. Mommy became a star, Sophie answered naturally, while chewing a piece of chicken. But this man here is going to take care of me now. Ms. Rose looked at William with an expression that mixed surprise and suspicion. Are you a relative of Maria's? It's A complicated situation, William replied, choosing his words carefully. I'm helping to sort out Sophie's situation. Oh, that's good. Maria was a very good woman, worked hard to support the girl. A shame she got sick and wouldn't go to the doctor, too proud to ask for help, that girl. Ms. Rose shook her head sadly. Sophie was always welcome here, too smart for her age. For the rest of the afternoon, William took Sophie to buy new clothes at a store downtown. He watched with tenderness how she was amazed by each colorful piece, as if she had never had new clothes before. When they got to the cashier, she whispered, "Mister, this isn't going to cost all the money Mommy left, is it? She said it was for my school when I get big." The financial concern of a 4-year-old child broke William's heart once more. Don't worry about money, Sophie. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But what if you become a star, too? Who will take care of me? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Sophie had learned very early that the important people in her life could disappear at any moment. That's not going to happen. He promised, though he knew he couldn't guarantee such a thing. At the end of the day, when they finally arrived at William's house in the affluent Myers Park neighborhood, Eleanor Vance was waiting in the living room, clearly worried. At 45, his wife remained elegant with well-kept blonde hair and always impeccable clothes, but at that moment her face showed tension and curiosity. "William, where have you been? I was worried when you didn't show up for lunch and didn't answer your phone." She stopped abruptly when she saw Sophie hiding behind William's legs. "And who is this child?" "Eleanor, this is Sophie. Well, she needs to stay with us for a few days while I sort out a complicated situation." William knew he was oversimplifying, but how could he explain the whole story without sounding completely crazy? Eleanor knelt to get on Sophie's level, her maternal instinct immediately surfacing. "Hi, sweetie. What's your full name?" "Sophie Grace Miller," the girl replied, clutching her doll Lucy against her chest. "My mommy became a star, and now the man is going to take care of me." Eleanor's face turned visibly pale upon hearing the last name. She stood up slowly, looking at William with an expression he couldn't decipher. It seemed like a mixture of shock, fear, and guilt. "Miller?" Eleanor repeated, her voice almost a whisper. "Did she say Miller?" "Yes, why? Do you know the family?" William studied his wife's face, realizing there was something she wasn't saying. Eleanor hesitated for a long moment, looking alternately at William and Sophie. I need to tell you something, but not in front of the child." At that moment, William knew that the complexity of the situation was only just beginning to unfold. Eleanor prepared a warm bath for Sophie, while William set up a makeshift room in the home office. The girl had naturally accepted the situation, as if moving into a stranger's house was a normal part of her life. This worried William. What kind of instability had such a young child already faced to adapt so easily? "The water is nice and warm, dear," Eleanor said, her voice forcedly cheerful as she helped Sophie out of her old clothes. "I'm going to wash your hair with a shampoo that smells like strawberries." Sophie smiled shyly. "Mommy liked strawberries. She said that when we had money, we would buy strawberries every day." The innocent comment made Eleanor swallow hard. While helping the girl in the bath, she noticed several small marks on Sophie's body. Not injuries, but signs of a difficult life. Clothes that were too tight, irregular nutrition, lack of basic medical care. The child was visibly malnourished, though she tried to hide it with her cheerful personality. After Sophie fell asleep in the makeshift room, hugging her doll, Lucy, William and Eleanor sat in the living room for the conversation they both knew was inevitable. The tension in the air was palpable, as if they were both prepared for revelations that would change everything. "I knew Maria," Eleanor began, her hands nervously smoothing her skirt. "Not just knew, we were close, very close." William leaned forward, trying to read his wife's expression. "How close? When? Why did you never tell me?" "Because Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Because it was during a period of my life I prefer to forget. I worked as a social worker from 2005 to 2008 after I finished college. Maria was one of my cases, one of your cases. She had sought help from social services because she was being pressured, threatened actually, by powerful people who wanted her to keep quiet about something she had discovered at work. William's stomach twisted. The irregularities at the construction company. Exactly. Eleanor got up and walked to the window, watching the silent street. Maria had documented several illegal practices: overbilling for materials, use of lower quality materials than specified in contracts, bribing city inspectors, things that harmed dozens of families. And you helped her? I tried. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly, but the threats against her intensified. They said if she talked, not only would she lose her job, but something could happen to her or her little daughter. Maria was terrified. William stood up abruptly. What kind of threats? Who was doing this? Eleanor turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes. William, are you sure you want to know? Because once I tell you everything, there's no going back. I need to know, especially now that Sophie is under our roof. Eleanor took a deep breath. The threats came directly from the Thompson construction office. Your father, Samuel, found out that Maria had copied documents and, well, he wasn't exactly known for resolving things peacefully. The revelation hit William like a punch to the stomach. His father, the man he had admired and respected his whole life, had threatened a young single mother. That can't be true. William, I know it's hard to accept, but... Eleanor approached him, placing a hand on his arm. Maria showed me the messages, the recorded phone calls. She was genuinely terrified. Why did you never tell me this? All these years of marriage, and you kept this a secret. Because when we met, you spoke of your father with such pride, such admiration. How could I destroy that by telling you that the man you idolized had ruined the life of an innocent young woman? William stepped away, pacing the room as he processed the information. Memories from his youth began to make disturbing sense. His father had always been strict in business, always emphasizing that weakness was not tolerated and that problems should be solved quickly and definitively. What happened to Maria after that? How did she manage to leave town? She didn't leave, Eleanor said softly. In fact, she stayed here in Charlotte all these years, practically in hiding. She moved several times, always to poorer neighborhoods, always trying not to draw attention. She survived by doing odd jobs, cleaning, babysitting, sales, anything that paid cash and left no trail. And Sophie, she grew up in that instability. Maria did her best, but a single mother, with no formal education, constantly moving. It's not an easy life for a child. William stopped pacing, a new realization hitting him. Eleanor, how did you know Maria was still in the city? Did you keep in touch? The silence that followed was telling. Eleanor lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. We met occasionally. I tried to help when I could. Money for medicine when Sophie got sick. Clothes I no longer wear, sometimes food. You were helping Maria secretly all these years? William's voice carried a mixture of admiration and betrayal. Why hide this from me? Because I knew that if you found out the connection to your family, you would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. And because... She hesitated again. Because what? Because there was something else. Something that not even Maria knew I knew. William felt a chill run down his spine. What else are you hiding from me? Eleanor walked to a drawer in the bookcase and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Maria wasn't the only person your father pressured to keep silent about the company's irregularities. Who else? My supervisor at social services. When he learned I was helping Maria document the threats, he received a visit. A very persuasive conversation about how damaging it would be for my career if I continued to get involved in the case. My father went after you too, not directly. Eleanor opened the envelope and took out some old photographs, but he knew exactly who I was and where I worked, and he made it very clear that my career as a social worker could end very quickly if I didn't stop causing trouble. William took the photographs with trembling hands. They were images of the construction company office, dated 2007. In one of them, Eleanor was clearly visible, talking to Maria in the building's parking lot. He had someone follow us for several weeks. They wanted to make sure I had gotten the message. Eleanor sat heavily on the sofa. That's why I stopped working as a social worker, William. It wasn't because I wanted to dedicate myself exclusively to our marriage, as I told you at the time. It was because I was forced out. The final revelation hit William like an avalanche. His wife had sacrificed her career to protect Maria, and he had never known. Worse, his father had been responsible for destroying 2 lives, Maria's and Eleanor's. Why did you marry me? The question came out harsher than he intended. Knowing all this about my family, because you are not your father, Eleanor answered without hesitation. During the whole time I worked on Maria's case, I was watching your family. You were different. You questioned his decisions. You showed genuine concern for the employees and clients. I saw how you treated people with respect and dignity. But you still lied to me all these years. I didn't lie. I just omitted, because I knew you would do exactly what you're doing now, question everything. Suffer with the discoveries, try to fix mistakes that weren't yours. William looked toward the room where Sophie was sleeping. And now? What do we do with all this information? And with Sophie? Now we do what is right, Eleanor said, getting up and walking to him. We take care of her. We give her the security and love that her mother couldn't provide. And we try to repair, as much as possible, the damage the past has caused. But there's something I still don't understand, William said slowly. If you and Maria kept in touch all these years, why didn't she ask for help directly when she got sick? Why orchestrate this meeting with me on the street? Eleanor's face grew even paler. Because there's one thing I haven't told you yet. Something I only found out last week. What? Maria wasn't just a former employee of the construction company, William. She was. At that moment, a soft cry came from the room where Sophie was sleeping. A small voice called out for Mommy repeatedly, the anguished sound of a child having nightmares about abandonment. Eleanor rushed to the room where Sophie was crying, followed by William. The girl was sitting up in bed, hugging her doll Lucy, tears streaming down her face as she murmured incomprehensible words between sobs. "It wasn't my fault," she repeated. "I didn't want to make Mommy sad. It wasn't my fault." Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and gently drew Sophie into her lap. "Shh, sweetie. It was just a nightmare. You're safe now." "Mommy said she would come back," Sophie sobbed. "She always said she would come back, but this time she didn't. And the lady at the hospital said it was my fault for not calling for help sooner." William felt anger burn in his chest. What kind of person would say something like that to a 4-year-old child? "Sophie, look at me," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "It was not your fault. You are just a child. And sick adults are the responsibility of other adults, not children. But I could have asked Ms. Rose for help, or the pharmacist on the corner." Mommy coughed up blood, and I got scared. Eleanor's heart broke imagining such a small child taking care of a seriously ill mother alone. "You did everything you could, my dear. Your mommy knew that. It took almost an hour for Sophie to calm down completely and go back to sleep." William and Eleanor returned to the living room, both shaken by the girl's vulnerability and the responsibility they had taken on. "She's going to need therapy," Eleanor said, her voice laced with professional concern. "A child shouldn't carry that kind of guilt." "We'll arrange everything she needs," William promised. "But now tell me what you were about to reveal before Sophie woke up. What else did you find out about Maria? Eleanor hesitated, looking toward the room where the girl was finally sleeping peacefully. Maybe it's better to wait. You've had enough revelations for one day. Eleanor, don't treat me like I'm fragile. If there's something else I need to know about the situation we've gotten ourselves into, I want to know now. His wife sighed deeply and went to a drawer from which she pulled a folder of documents William had never seen before. Last week, Maria came to see me for the last time. She was very sick, clearly weaker than I had ever seen her, but desperate to tell me something. What did she want? She had found out something about Sophie, something she had hidden from me all these years. Eleanor opened the folder and took out some yellowed medical documents. Maria never told me who Sophie's father was. She always claimed it was a brief relationship that ended badly. William took the papers with growing apprehension. They were prenatal and paternity tests, some dated 5 years ago. But last week, when she realized she was dying, she finally told me the truth. Sophie is not the daughter of a stranger, William. What do you mean? Her father is someone in your family. William's world stopped. He looked at the documents with trembling hands, searching for names, for any information that would confirm or deny what Eleanor was insinuating. Who? His voice was just a whisper. Your brother, Casey? William slumped into the armchair, the weight of the revelation almost unbearable. Casey Thompson, his younger brother, had always been the rebel of the family. At 48, he had a history of troubled relationships, drinking problems, and a tendency to disappear for months without a word to the family. How can you be sure? Maria had kept evidence, photographs, messages, and this. Eleanor pulled a DNA test from the folder dated 4 years ago. She managed to get a hair sample from Casey during a family party you invited them to, remember? Your father's 50th birthday party. William vaguely remembered. Maria had shown up at the party as a guest of one of the construction company's employees. It had been a pleasant evening, and everyone had complimented how polite and friendly she was. He never imagined she was there with ulterior motives. The result was positive. Casey is Sophie's biological father. Why did she never say anything? Why hide this from us? Because Casey abandoned her when he found out about the pregnancy. Eleanor showed him a series of printed messages. She was 22, in love, and naive. When she told him about the pregnancy, he not only rejected her but also threatened her, saying that if she tried to link the baby to the Thompson family, she would suffer the consequences. William read the messages with growing horror. His brother's words were cruel, calculated to hurt and intimidate a vulnerable young woman. She told me that initially she thought about coming to you, about telling you or your father the truth. But when she started discovering the irregularities at the company and saw how the family reacted to threats against their interests, she realized it would be too dangerous. Exactly. So she decided to raise Sophie alone, in secret, hoping that one day she could tell the truth when the situation was safer. William stood up and began to pace the room, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. So Sophie isn't just an orphan child. I decided to help. She's my niece. She's real family. And there's more, Eleanor said hesitantly. How can there be more? Maria suspected that your father knew. About Sophie being his granddaughter, William's blood ran cold. What do you mean he knew? In recent years, Samuel would occasionally show up at the places where Maria worked. He never spoke to her directly, but it was as if he were watching, checking to see if Sophie was okay. I think he found out about Casey's paternity and, in his own twisted way, was trying to make sure his granddaughter didn't live in absolute poverty. William remembered several occasions when his father had left home without explanation, especially in the last years before his hospitalization for heart problems. He always claimed he was taking care of pending business. That's why Maria instructed Sophie to find me, specifically, he murmured. She knew that if something happened to her, I would make the connections and discover the truth. She planned everything very carefully, Eleanor confirmed. The house, the documents in the safe, even the way she taught Sophie to approach you on the street. She knew you wouldn't be able to abandon a child in need. And you agreed to this plan? Yes, because I believed it would be the best for Sophie, and because I knew that, of all the men in the Thompson family, you were the only one who could be trusted to do the right thing. William stopped pacing and looked at his wife with a mixture of admiration and exhaustion. So you two conspired to put me in this situation. It wasn't a conspiracy, it was an act of faith in your character. And now, what do I do with this information? Confront Casey? Tell Sophie who her father is? For now, nothing, Eleanor said firmly. Sophie has just lost her mother and is trying to adapt to a new life. Finding out that her father rejected her before she was even born would be devastating. And Casey is a problem for another day. First, we need to take care of Sophie's emotional well-being. Then, when she's more stable, we can decide how and when to approach the rest of the family. William sat down again, feeling exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. You know what bothers me most? That my father probably knew he had a granddaughter living in poverty and still allowed it to continue. Maybe he was trying to protect her in his own way, keeping his distance so she wouldn't be associated with the questionable activities of the company. Or maybe he was just a coward who preferred to ignore his responsibility. Eleanor came over and placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. William, you are not responsible for your father's or your brother's mistakes, but now you have the chance to make a difference in Sophie's life. A difference that should have been made years ago, but that can still be made now. They were silent for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, William spoke. Tomorrow, we're going to the courthouse to register Sophie as our temporary dependent. Then we'll find a good child psychologist. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation with my brother. That night, William could barely sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the girl sleeping in the next room. A girl who he had discovered was his niece, a child who had been abandoned by her father before she was even born and was now under his protection. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of Sophie flying free as a bird, far from all the secrets and lies that had dominated her early years of life. The next 3 days passed in a routine carefully built around Sophie's needs. William had cancelled all non-essential meetings to stay home, watching as the girl gradually adapted to the new environment. It was fascinating and painful at the same time to see how she constantly tested the limits, as if expecting that at any moment someone would tell her it had all been a mistake and she had to leave. "Can I really eat all of this?" Sophie asked on Thursday morning, looking at the plate full of fruit, buttered toast, and milk that Eleanor had prepared. "You sure can, sweetie," Eleanor replied, sitting next to her at the kitchen table. "And when you're done, if you're still hungry, you can ask for more." Sophie ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last meal of her life. William watched from the kitchen doorway, remembering Ms. Rose's words about how Maria had struggled to feed her daughter properly. "Uncle Will," Sophie said suddenly, "are you sure I can stay here? Sometimes people change their minds about me." The casual question carried so much emotional weight that William felt his heart tighten. "Sophie, you're going to stay here with us for as long as you need. No one is going to change their mind about you. Promise. I promise." After breakfast, while Sophie was drawing in the living room, always birds, William had noticed, he finally made the call he had been putting off. Casey answered on the 5th ring, his hoarse voice suggesting he had just woken up, even though it was already past 10 in the morning. "Brother." "What a surprise. You usually only call when there's trouble at the company. I need to talk to you. It's important. You can talk in person, Casey, this afternoon. There was a pause. All right, but I can't come to your house. I'm at the new apartment on Queens Road. You know that building near the mall? William knew the place. Casey had moved there 6 months ago after another relationship had ended badly. I'll be there at 3. Can I know what this is about? When we get there. At 3 o'clock sharp, William was at the door of Casey's apartment. His brother opened it wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and denim shorts, his hair disheveled and eyes slightly bloodshot. The apartment smelled of cigarettes and beer, with several empty bottles scattered on the coffee table. "Are you okay?" William asked, genuinely concerned about his brother's appearance. "I'm great, just relaxing on my day off." Casey threw himself on the couch and gestured for William to sit. "So, what's the emergency?" William remained standing, taking a photo of Sophie from his pocket that he had taken the morning before. The girl was smiling, holding her doll Lucy in the garden of his house. "Do you recognize this child?" Casey took the photo, and William watched his reaction carefully. For a moment his brother's face remained neutral, then almost imperceptibly his eyes widened and his skin paled. "I've never seen this girl in my life," he said, but his voice betrayed the lie. "Are you sure? Look closely." Casey quickly handed back the photo as if it burned his fingers. "I said I've never seen her. Why are you showing me a picture of a strange kid?" "Because this child is not a stranger to you, Casey, and you know it." Casey stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Maria Miller." The name hit Casey like a gunshot. He turned slowly, his face now clearly frightened. "What do you know about Maria?" "I know you had a relationship. I know she got pregnant. And I know you abandoned her when you found out. Who told you that? Does it matter?" "The important thing is that now I know the truth. And I know that this girl," William pointed to the photo, "is your daughter." Casey sank back onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. Damn, 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 damn. Is that all you have to say? Your daughter lost her mother a week ago and is living in my house, and all you can do is curse? "She's not my daughter," Casey exploded. "I told Maria at the time I wanted nothing to do with that child. I made it very clear that she shouldn't expect anything from me. You abandoned a 22-year-old pregnant woman. I was 24. I was young, not ready to be a father. And besides, who guaranteed the child was even mine?" William took back the photo and stared at Sophie's smiling face. "You looked at this girl and told me you'd never seen her before, but when I said Maria's name, you knew exactly who I was talking about. And from your panic, it's clear you know very well that Sophie is your daughter. Where is she now?" The question came out as a whisper. "At my house. Like I said, Maria passed away a week ago." "Maria is... she's dead?" For the first time since he arrived, William saw something that looked like genuine emotion on his brother's face. Pneumonia untreated, probably because she didn't have money for proper doctors. Casey was silent for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "How was she? How was Maria?" "In recent years, I mean, struggling, working precarious jobs, constantly moving, raising Sophie alone, all because you abandoned her and she was afraid to seek help from the family. I didn't know she was having a hard time." "You didn't want to know, Casey. There's a difference." Casey stood up and went to a drawer, from which he took a bottle of whiskey and a glass. He poured a generous dose and drank it in one go. "Are you going to judge me now?" Mr. Perfect, who never made mistakes in his life. "I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to tell you that your daughter exists, that she needs a family, and to know what you plan to do about it." "What do I plan to do?" Casey laughed bitterly. "I plan to continue my life exactly as before. That girl is better off without me." "How can you say that? You don't even know her." "That's exactly why. I don't know how to be a father, William. I never did. And besides, she already has you taking care of her, apparently. She doesn't just have me. She has a right to know her father." "A right?" Casey turned, his eyes shining with anger. "What right? I didn't ask for her to be born. I made it very clear to Maria that I didn't want responsibilities. You made it clear you were a coward, and you made it clear you're a saint. Congratulations, brother. Now you have an adopted daughter to take care of and feel good about yourself." The coldness of Casey's words made William realize he had underestimated the level of his brother's rejection. "You really don't even want to meet her? For what? To confuse the girl's head? To make promises I can't keep?" Casey poured another whiskey. "She's better off without me, William, and I'm better off without this complication. This complication has a name. Sophie. I don't care what her name is. It's not my problem." William felt anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. "And if she asks about her father? What should I say? Tell her he died. Tell her he left. Say anything but the truth. The truth that her father is a cowardly drunk who prefers to run away from his responsibilities." Casey stopped with the glass halfway to his mouth. "Watch it. William, you may be my older brother, but that doesn't give you the right to insult me. Then give me a reason not to insult you. Explain to me how a man can just discard his own daughter as if she were trash. Because some people aren't meant to be parents," Casey shouted, the glass flying against the wall and shattering. "Because some people are too selfish, too irresponsible, too problematic to take care of a child. You wanted me to ruin her life too." The shout revealed more than Casey probably intended. William saw for a moment not the cold, calculating man he had just met, but a brother tormented by his own limitations. "You could have tried. And if I tried and failed? What if I drank too much one day and did something terrible? What if I yelled at her or abandoned her after she had already grown attached to me?" Casey's voice was broken now. At least this way she had a chance at a better life. A better life? Casey? She grew up in poverty, watching her mother struggle alone, without security, without stability, but without me to make things worse. William realized there was a chasm between them that would not be crossed that afternoon. He put Sophie's photo back in his pocket and headed for the door. "If you change your mind, I won't. If you do, you know where to find me." When William got home, he found Sophie asleep on the couch, her doll, Lucy, hugged against her chest. Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "Worse than I expected." William sat in the armchair across from the sofa, watching Sophie sleep. Even in her sleep, she seemed alert, as if she were always ready to wake up and face some danger. It was the sleep of a child who had learned too early that the world was not a safe place. "He doesn't want to meet her," William said finally. "Maybe it's for the best." "Is it? A girl grows up without a father, and we say it's for the best. A girl grows up without a father who doesn't want her. That might be for the best." William knew Eleanor was right, but it still hurt to know that Sophie had been rejected twice by the same man. Once before she was born, and again now, when she needed family the most. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Casey, and Sophie was gradually beginning to show signs of emotional recovery. Her laughter was becoming more frequent, and she had stopped asking every day if she could really stay at William and Eleanor's house. But it was during a Saturday afternoon, while playing in the garden, that something unexpected happened. William was watering the plants when he heard Sophie chatting excitedly with someone on the other side of the fence. Curious, he approached and saw an elderly white-haired lady watching the girl with interest. "Hi, Grandma," Sophie said happily. "Want to see my doll? Her name is Lucy." The lady smiled tenderly. "What a beautiful doll, dear. What's your name?" "Sophie Grace Miller. But now I live with Uncle Will and Aunt Eleanor because my mommy became a star." The lady's face changed completely. She turned pale and held onto the fence tightly, as if she needed support to keep from falling. You said Miller?" The woman's voice trembled. "Hi," William interrupted, approaching. I'm sorry we haven't met. I'm William Thompson." The lady looked at him with a strange expression, as if she were seeing a ghost. "Thompson? Are you Samuel Thompson's son?" "I was. He passed away 3 years ago. Did you know him?" "I knew him," she repeated slowly. "My name is Carol Miller. I was Maria's aunt." The world stopped for William. The aunt from Chicago who had left Maria the inheritance. The woman who, according to the documents they had found, was the only family Maria had. "Ms. Carroll, what a surprise to find you here in Charlotte." "It's no surprise," she said, still looking at Sophie with tears in her eyes. "I came here specifically when I learned that Maria had. When I learned about my niece." Sophie, oblivious to the tension of the moment, continued playing with her doll. "Grandma Carroll, did you know my mommy?" "I did, my dear. Your mother was. She was a very special person." William noticed there was something more in Carol's expression, a sadness that went beyond grief for Maria. "Miss Carroll, would you like to come in? We can talk while Sophie plays." Carol hesitated. "I don't know if it's appropriate. Actually, I came here because I have some things that belong to Maria, and I'd like to give them to Sophie. Please come in." Sophie would be happy to hear stories about her mother. Carol entered the house and was immediately greeted by Eleanor, who had come out to see who was visiting. When the introductions were made, Eleanor showed the same surprise William had felt. "So you're the aunt who left Maria the inheritance," Eleanor said. "Among other things," Carol replied mysteriously. They sat in the living room while Sophie played in the garden, always visible through the large windows. Carol seemed to be struggling internally with something, her eyes alternating between watching the girl and looking at the floor. "How long have you known about Sophie?" William asked. "Since she was born. Maria told me about the pregnancy, about who the father was. She told you about Casey." Carol nodded sadly, and about how he rejected her. "But she also told me about the threats she was receiving from his family, the threats from my father." Yes, Maria was terrified when she found out she was pregnant, not only because Casey abandoned her, but because she knew his family wouldn't accept an inconvenient granddaughter. Eleanor leaned forward. "But why didn't you bring Maria and Sophie to Chicago? Why let them live in hardship here?" Carol sighed deeply because Maria refused. She said that running away to Chicago would be like admitting guilt for something she hadn't done. And more importantly, she wanted Sophie to grow up near her paternal family, even from a distance, because she believed that one day the truth would come out. So she planned all of this? Not exactly. Maria always hoped that you would naturally find out about Sophie. She kept the Miller surname precisely so that if something happened to her, it would be possible to make the connections. William thought of the letter Maria had left for him. She specifically chose for me to find Sophie because she spent years watching you from afar, watching how you treated the employees, how you questioned your father's decisions, how you genuinely cared about people. Carol looked through the window at Sophie. She knew you would do the right thing. "But there's something else, isn't there?" Eleanor asked, noticing that Carol was still hiding something. Carol was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled an old, yellowed envelope from her purse. "There's something you need to know about Maria. Something she made me promise to reveal only if something happened to her, and if Sophie was in the care of the Thompson family." William felt a chill run down his spine. What else could there be? Maria wasn't just a secretary at the construction company. She was much more than that to someone in the family. "What do you mean?" Carol opened the envelope and pulled out several old photographs. William immediately recognized the construction company office, but the images showed something he had never seen before. His father, Samuel, in clearly intimate situations with Maria. "My God," Eleanor whispered. "Maria and Samuel had a relationship that lasted almost 2 years, Carol said softly. From 2005 to 2007. William felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. My father and Maria. It was a genuine relationship, at least on her part. Samuel promised to leave his wife, promised to go public with their relationship. Maria believed him, but he was married to my mother. And Maria found out too late that he never really intended to leave his wife. When she confronted him about his promises, he dismissed her coldly. Eleanor picked up one of the photographs, so when Casey got involved with Maria, she was vulnerable, hurt by Samuel's rejection. Casey represented a chance to stay connected to the family, even in a different way. The revelation was overwhelming. William tried to process the idea that his father had not only threatened Maria professionally, but had also deceived her emotionally. "That's why the threats were so effective," he murmured. "She knew my father was capable of being cruel because she had already experienced it personally." Exactly. And when she found out she was pregnant with Casey's child, she realized she was in an impossible situation. If she told about the pregnancy, Samuel could use their past relationship against her. If she kept silent, she would be alone. She chose to be alone. She chose to protect her daughter in the only way she could. At that moment, Sophie ran into the room, interrupting the heavy conversation of the adults. "Grandma Carol, are you staying for dinner? Aunt Eleanor makes the best mac and cheese in the world." Carol looked at the girl with teary eyes. "If Uncle Will and Aunt Eleanor don't mind." "Of course we don't mind," William said quickly, though his mind was still reeling from the revelations. During dinner, Carol told stories about Maria as a child, stories that made Sophie laugh and feel connected to the mother she had lost. But William could barely focus on the conversation, his mind spinning with the complexity of the situation they were in. After Sophie went to bed, Carol revealed one more crucial piece of information. "There's something else you need to know. About the inheritance I left for Maria." "What about the inheritance?" "It wasn't just money. I also left some documents that Maria had asked me to keep. Documents about the irregularities at the construction company." William sat up straight in his chair. "What kind of documents?" "Evidence that could incriminate not only Samuel, but several other people involved in the schemes. Maria had documented everything meticulously during the years she worked there. And where are these documents now? With my lawyer in Chicago. Maria instructed me to hand them over only if something happened to her and if Sophie was being cared for by someone she trusted." Eleanor understood the implications immediately. "This means we now have evidence that could expose all the crimes of the past. But it also means," William said slowly, "that other people might be interested in getting these documents back. People who would prefer certain information to remain buried." Carol nodded gravely. "That's why Maria was so worried about Sophie's safety. She knew these documents were both a protection and a danger." "What kind of danger?" "The kind of danger that makes powerful people take drastic measures to protect their secrets." That night, after Carol left with the promise to return the following week with the documents, William and Eleanor stayed up late, discussing the implications of everything they had discovered. "We're dealing with much more than an orphaned child," Eleanor said. "We're dealing with a situation that could have dangerous ramifications, but we can't abandon Sophie now. She's family, and besides, we don't know who else might be interested in her because of these documents. What do you think we should do?" William looked toward the room where Sophie was sleeping, probably dreaming of free-flying birds. "I think we need to prepare for a much bigger battle than we imagined." On the Monday following Carol's visit, William woke up to an unexpected call. It was Robert Davis, the construction company's accountant for over 15 years, his voice filled with urgency. "William, I need to talk to you. It's about some documents that showed up in the monthly audit." "What kind of documents?" "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." "Can you come to the office now?" "It's important." An hour later, William was in the company's office. Watching Robert spread several papers across the conference table. The accountant, a meticulous 60-year-old man, looked genuinely worried. I found these inconsistencies while reviewing the files from 2005 to 2007, Robert said, pointing to yellowed spreadsheets. Someone had altered some entries, but very subtly. William examined the numbers. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but Robert had circled several discrepancies in red. What exactly did you find? Systematic overbilling, materials bought for one price and charged to clients for another. The difference went to accounts that, well, that I can't trace. William's heart raced. It was exactly the kind of irregularity Maria had mentioned in her letter. Do you have any idea who might have made these changes? That's the strange part. The changes were made by someone with full administrative access, someone who knew the system very well. Robert paused. William, do you know if your father had personal financial problems during that period? The question hit William like a punch. Why do you ask? Because the amount of money diverted. It's considerable. Enough to support a standard of living well above what the company's legitimate profits would allow. William thought of the luxurious house where he had grown up, the expensive cars his father always drove, the frequent trips the family took. He had always assumed it all came from legitimate business profits. Robert, I need you to keep this in absolute secrecy for now. Of course, but William, if these irregularities come to light during an external audit, there won't be an external audit, at least not yet. When William arrived home for lunch, he found Sophie in the kitchen helping Eleanor prepare sandwiches. The girl had adapted surprisingly well to the domestic routine, always offering to help with simple tasks. "Uncle Will!" she shouted happily. "I learned to cut tomatoes without hurting myself." "That's wonderful," he replied, forcing a smile despite the worry consuming him. During lunch, Sophie chatted about a storybook Eleanor had read to her, about the birds that visited the garden, about how she was looking forward to starting school. It was hard to believe that just 3 weeks ago she was a traumatized child living alone in a ruined house. "Aunt Eleanor, can I ask a question?" Sophie said suddenly. "Of course, dear. Why don't you have kids? You would be very good parents." The innocent question created an uncomfortable silence at the table. William and Eleanor exchanged a look full of unspoken pain. "Sometimes things just don't happen the way we'd like," Eleanor replied softly. "But now you have me. Doesn't that count?" "Of course it counts," William said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're the best thing that's happened to us in a long time." After lunch, while Sophie played in the yard, William told Eleanor about his conversation with Robert. "So the irregularities Maria discovered were even worse than we imagined," she said, "and now we have concrete evidence. The question is, what do we do with it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that if we make this information public, we will destroy the company's reputation. We will harm dozens of innocent employees, and we will open an investigation that could reveal things we'd rather keep buried." Eleanor understood the complexity of the situation. "But if we do nothing, we are complicit in past crimes. And if we do something, we could be putting Sophie in danger." At that moment, the doorbell rang. William opened the door and found a man in a dark suit he didn't recognize. "Mr. William Thompson, my name is Mr. Mark Peterson. I'm an attorney, and I'd like to talk to you about a matter that might be of interest to you." "What kind of matter?" "About a child I believe is in your care. Sophie Grace Miller." William's blood ran cold. "Who is looking for her? What's your interest in the girl? May I come in? It's a conversation I'd prefer to have in private." William hesitated, but finally let the man in. They sat in the living room while Eleanor remained close, clearly suspicious. "I represent some clients who have a legitimate interest in the girl's well-being," said Mr. Peterson. "What kind of interest? And what kind of clients?" clients who prefer to remain anonymous for now, but I can assure you they have the child's best interests at heart." "That's not an answer," Eleanor said firmly. "If you have something specific to say it. Otherwise, I suggest you leave." Mr. Peterson smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Very well, I'll be direct. My clients know about the documents the child's mother left, and they know that these documents can cause unnecessary complications for many people. And what does that have to do with us? Everything. Because those documents are now technically the child's inheritance, and whoever takes care of the child has access to that inheritance." William immediately understood the implicit threat. "You're suggesting that someone wants the documents back?" "I'm suggesting that it would be simpler for everyone if these documents disappeared, and that the people willing to ensure this happens are prepared to be very generous with those who cooperate. And if we don't cooperate—" Mr. Peterson stood up, adjusting his tie. "Let's hope it won't be necessary to explore that possibility." After the lawyer left, William and Eleanor were silent for several minutes, processing the veiled threat they had just received. "They know about the documents," Eleanor said finally, "and they know Sophie is with us. What do we do?" Before William could answer, Sophie ran into the room, tears streaming down her face. "Uncle Will! Aunt Eleanor! There's a man outside taking pictures of the house." William rushed to the window and saw a dark figure across the street, clearly watching their property. When he realized he had been noticed, the man quickly got into a dark car and drove away. "They're watching us," he murmured. "Who's watching us?" Sophie asked, still frightened. Eleanor hugged her, trying to reassure her. "No one important, dear. Just someone who got lost." But William knew it wasn't true. They had entered a dangerous game, and the rules were changing quickly. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, they had a conversation that would change everything. "We can't stay here," William said. "If they're watching us, it's not safe. Where would we go?" "I don't know yet. But first thing tomorrow, I'm going to call Carol and ask her to come get the documents. If that's what they want, that's what they'll get. And then we try to go back to a normal life and hope they leave us alone." But even as he said it, William knew it wouldn't be that simple. People who made veiled threats and sent people to watch family homes were not the type to simply give up and go away. At 2 a.m, William was still awake, looking out the bedroom window to make sure no one was watching the house. That's when he noticed a strange light coming from the backyard. He went downstairs silently and, through the kitchen window, saw something that made his blood freeze. A hooded figure was fiddling in the garden where Sophie used to play, as if looking for something buried. William grabbed a flashlight and went out the back door, but when he reached the garden, the figure had disappeared. However, there were clear signs that someone had dug in several different places. "They're looking for something," he whispered to himself. But what? And how did they know they might find something there? It was then that he realized there might be much more to Maria's inheritance than Carol had revealed, and that the documents she had mentioned might not be the only valuable thing Maria had left behind. The next morning, William woke Eleanor before dawn and told her about the incident in the garden. Together, they carefully examined the excavation marks, trying to understand what someone might be looking for. "Look at this," Eleanor said, pointing to an area near the hose where Sophie used to play. "These marks are deeper than the others." William knelt and examined the soil. Indeed, there were signs that someone had dug there with more determination, as if they knew specifically what they were looking for. "I'll get a shovel," he said. "If there's something buried here, I'd rather we be the ones to find it." They dug for almost an hour until William's shovel hit something solid. Carefully, they removed the dirt and revealed a small metal box, similar to the one they had found in Maria's house, but smaller. "How did this box get into our garden?" Eleanor asked, confused. "It didn't get into your garden," a voice said from behind them. "It was always here." They turned quickly and saw Carol standing at the entrance to the yard, holding a cup of coffee as if her presence there were the most natural thing in the world. Carol. "How did you get in here?" William asked, still holding the dirt-covered box. "The back door was open. Sorry for the scare, but I needed to get here before you found this on your own." She approached, her face showing a concern she hadn't shown on her previous visit. "You knew there was something buried here?" "I knew. Maria told me 6 months ago. She came here several times during the construction of this house. When you were traveling, she buried this box as a kind of insurance." Eleanor stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands. "Insurance against what?" "Against what's happening now. Powerful people trying to recover evidence that compromises them." William carefully opened the box. Inside, he found a small digital recorder, several photographs, and a diary in Maria's handwriting. "These are recordings of the conversations Maria had with Samuel during their relationship," Carol explained. "Conversations where he admitted to the irregularities, talked about bribery, about how to solve problems with families who complained about the quality of the work." "My God," William whispered, picking up the recorder. "And there are also the photographs of the secret bank accounts, the unofficial payments, everything she managed to document during the years she worked at the company." "Why did she bury this here, in our house?" "Because she knew that if something happened to her, you would be the right people to decide what to do with this information." At that moment, they heard Sophie's voice coming from the kitchen, calling for Eleanor to help her get dressed. The contrast between the child's innocence and the gravity of the situation that enveloped them was devastating. "Let's go inside," Eleanor said. "We need to talk about this away from Sophie." In the living room, while Sophie had breakfast in the kitchen, Carol revealed more details about Maria's plan. "She didn't want revenge," Carol said. "She wanted justice. She wanted the families that were harmed to be compensated. She wanted Sophie to grow up knowing that her mother had done the right thing. But at the same time, she knew this would put Sophie in danger," William observed. "That's why all the care, all the planning. She believed that if Sophie were under your protection, she would have the necessary strength to face any threat." William picked up the diary and flipped through a few pages. Maria's delicate handwriting told a story of love, betrayal, fear, and finally, determination. "March 15th, 2007, he read aloud. "Samuel told me today that our relationship needs to end, that his family would never accept a secretary as a wife. But that's not all. I found out he knows about the documents I copied. He knows I have evidence of everything he's done, and he's using it to control me." Eleanor came closer. "Keep reading." "I'm pregnant. I haven't told anyone yet, not Samuel, not Casey. I don't know what to do. If I tell Samuel, he might use the child against me. If I tell Casey, I might ruin his life too. Maybe it's better to run away, raise my baby far from here, far from this family that seems cursed." "But she didn't run away," Carol said sadly. "Why not?" "Because she found out she was being followed. People hired by Samuel to make sure she didn't disappear with the evidence she had." William continued reading. "April 25th, 2007. Casey broke up with me today, said he doesn't want responsibilities, that it was a mistake to get involved with me. I didn't tell him about the pregnancy. What would be the point? He's already made it clear he doesn't want me in his life. So she decided to raise Sophie alone, but staying close to the family," Eleanor concluded. "Exactly. She believed that one day the truth would come out naturally, and that when it did, Sophie would be in a position to receive what was hers by right." "What right?" William asked. Carol hesitated. "William, there's something about the inheritance I haven't told you yet. The money Maria left for Sophie didn't just come from my aunt in Chicago. Where else? It came from regular deposits someone made into Maria's account for years. Deposits always in cash, always the same amount, always on the same date of the month." William felt his stomach churn. Was my father paying child support for Sophie? Not just child support. From the amounts and the regularity, it seems he was. Trying to compensate for what he had done. Maybe trying to buy Maria's silence. Maybe genuinely wanting to help his granddaughter. He knew Sophie was his granddaughter. Maria believed so, especially after Sophie grew up and looked like Casey as a child. At that moment, Sophie appeared at the living room door, wearing the blue dress Eleanor had bought for her. "Grandma Carol, I didn't know you were back." She ran to hug the elderly woman. "Hi, my dear. I brought some things that belong to your mother." "What kind of things?" Carol looked at William and Eleanor, silently asking for permission. They nodded. "Some photographs of your mother when she was young, some simple jewelry she liked, and—" Carol hesitated. "And a letter she wrote for you, for when you're older." Sophie's eyes sparkled. "Can I see the letter now?" "The letter is for when you're a little bigger," Carol said gently, "but I can show you the photographs." While Carol showed the photos to Sophie, William and Eleanor exchanged worried glances. The situation was becoming more complex and dangerous with each revelation. "Eleanor," William whispered, "we need to make a decision. Either we hand over everything, the documents, the recordings, all the material Maria left, or we face the consequences of keeping it." "And what are the consequences of handing it over?" "The families that were harmed never get justice. The crimes of the past go unpunished. And Sophie will never know the whole truth about why her mother suffered so much. And the consequences of keeping it." William looked at Sophie, who was laughing as Carol told a story about one of the photographs. "I don't know, but I'm afraid to find out." That afternoon, after Carol left with the promise to return the next day with the documents from Chicago, William received a call that confirmed his worst fears. "Mr. Thompson?" The voice was rough, clearly disguised. "We hope you found what we were looking for in your garden." "Who is this?" "Someone who prefers not to be identified, but someone who knows that you now have in your hands material that does not belong to you. And if I do, then we suggest a trade. The material for guarantees that your family will remain safe." The line went dead before William could respond. He looked at Sophie, who was drawing peacefully at the living room table, and realized that the time had come to make a decision that would change their lives forever. The night following the threatening call, William barely slept. He got up several times to check the windows, confirm the doors were locked, and watch for any suspicious movements on the street. With every noise, his heart raced. The responsibility for Sophie had become an overwhelming weight, but at the same time, it was what kept him determined to find a solution. At 5 in the morning, he made a decision. He gently woke Eleanor and whispered, "We need to talk." In the kitchen, while they prepared coffee in silence, William finally verbalized what he had been thinking all night. "I'm going to hand it all over. The documents, the recordings, everything Maria left." Eleanor stopped stirring the sugar in her coffee. "Are you sure? I can't put Sophie at risk because of my father's sins. She's already lost her mother. She can't lose anything else. And justice? And the families that were harmed? I'll find another way to compensate them. With my own money if necessary. But first, Sophie needs to be safe." Eleanor nodded slowly. "And how do you plan to make this handover?" "I'm going to call that lawyer, Mr. Peterson. I'll arrange a meeting and hand everything over." But when William tried to make the call an hour later, he found that Mr. Peterson's number was out of service. The law firm he had mentioned did not exist at the given address. It was as if the man had never existed. "This is strange," he murmured, hanging up the phone. "What happened?" Eleanor asked. "I can't find this lawyer. It's like he disappeared." At that moment, Sophie appeared in the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Uncle Will." "Good morning, Aunt Eleanor." "Good morning, dear," Eleanor said, quickly changing her tone of voice to something more cheerful. "How about scrambled eggs for breakfast?" During breakfast, Sophie was quieter than usual. She pushed the food around on her plate without much appetite, occasionally looking out the window with a worried expression. "Sophie, is everything okay?" William asked. "I had a strange dream," she said softly. "I dreamed that some bad men came to get Mommy, but she had already become a star, so they wanted to take me instead." Eleanor's heart ached. "It was just a dream. My dear, no one is going to take you from us. Promise. I promise." But even as she made the promise, Eleanor exchanged a worried look with William. Sophie's childish intuition seemed to be picking up on the tension they were trying to hide. At 10 in the morning, Carol arrived as promised, bringing a bulky folder with documents from Chicago. But this time, she was not alone. A man in his 50s accompanied her, introduced as Mr. Fernando Castro, a lawyer specializing in family law. "I brought Mr. Castro because I think you're going to need legal assistance," Carol explained. "The situation is more complicated than I imagined." They sat in the living room while Sophie played in the yard, always visible through the windows. Mr. Castro opened his briefcase and spread several documents on the coffee table. "I studied the case during the trip," he said, "and I need to warn you. You are dealing with people who have a lot to lose if this information becomes public." "What kind of people?" William asked. "Former city officials who received bribes, other businessmen who participated in the schemes, even some influential families in the city who benefited improperly." Eleanor leaned forward. "You mean it's not just about the Thompson family's past?" "Exactly. The construction company's irregularities were just one piece of a much larger scheme. Maria, without knowing it, documented a network of corruption that involved several companies and local authorities." William felt the weight of responsibility increase even more. "And now all these people know we have evidence against them." "Yes, and some of these people have enough resources and contacts to make your lives very difficult." Carol opened the folder she had brought. "That's why I thought it was important for you to see this. It was an official document, sealed and stamped, that William couldn't fully understand. It's a guardianship petition," Mr. Castro explained. "Someone is trying to obtain legal custody of Sophie, claiming that you are not close relatives and have no legal right to care for her." "Who filed this petition?" Eleanor asked, alarmed. "A charitable foundation called the Family Protection Institute. But when we investigated further, we found that this foundation is funded by people who have a direct interest in the documents Sophie inherited." William stood up abruptly. "They want to take Sophie from us to get access to the documents. That's the most likely interpretation. If they get guardianship, they will have legal control over everything that belongs to her. This can't be legal. Technically it is. You have no proven blood ties to Sophie. You haven't gone through a formal adoption process, and there is no specific will naming you as guardians." Eleanor covered her face with her hands. "What can we do?" "First, immediately start the adoption process. Second, move the documents to a safe place. And third," Mr. Castro hesitated. "What?" "Consider making the information public before they can stop it." The suggestion created a heavy silence in the room. William looked through the window at Sophie, who was trying to teach tricks to a bird that had landed near her. "If we go public, Sophie will be at the center of a scandal that could last for years," he said. "But if we don't go public, she could be taken from you and spend the rest of her childhood under the control of people who only want to use her inheritance." Carol spoke up for the first time in several minutes. "There's a third option." "What?" "Directly confront the person responsible for all of this." "What do you mean?" Carol pulled an old photograph from the folder that William recognized immediately. It was his father, Samuel, but in a photo he had never seen before. Samuel was at a party, arm in arm with several people, including some William recognized as former mayors and local businessmen. This photo was taken in 2006, during a party celebrating the approval of several urban projects that benefited the group, Carol explained. Maria was serving as a waitress at this party and managed to get this picture. And what does this have to do with confronting someone? Because one of the people in this photo is still alive, still has influence in the city, and still has a lot to lose if this information becomes public. Carol pointed to a burly man in the photo with white hair and a broad smile. Julius Matthews, former mayor, current president of the city council, and the main beneficiary of the schemes your father organized. William knew the name. Julius Matthews was a respected public figure, often mentioned in local newspapers for his social work and contributions to the city. Are you suggesting I confront an influential politician? I'm suggesting you have a civilized conversation with him. Show him you know the truth and negotiate a solution that protects Sophie without destroying your life. Mr. Castro agreed. Sometimes the best strategy is diplomacy, especially when you have information that the other person needs to keep secret. At that moment, Sophie ran into the room, interrupting the tense conversation of the adults. "Grandma Carol, I got a bird to eat from my hand." Her face was radiant with joy. "He wasn't afraid of me." Carol smiled, but her eyes were teary. "That's wonderful, my dear. Birds know when they find someone with a good heart. Can I show you tomorrow?" He said he'll come back. "Of course you can," Eleanor replied, hugging the girl. After Sophie returned to the yard, the reality of the situation weighed on the adults again. "She can't grow up in the middle of this mess," William said finally. "I'm going to talk to this Julius Matthews. Today." "Are you sure?" Eleanor asked. "I'm sure. Sophie deserves to have a normal childhood without fear, without threats, without having to hide. If that means negotiating with people I don't like, then that's what I'll do." Mr. Castro offered to accompany him, but William refused. This needs to be a conversation between two people who know the truth about the past. No intermediaries, no legal formalities, just two people trying to find a solution. That afternoon, William headed to Julius Matthews' office in downtown Charlotte, carrying a folder with copies of the most compromising documents. He didn't know if he was walking towards a solution or an even bigger disaster. But he knew he could no longer live in fear. Sophie deserved more than that. Julius Matthews' office was on the 10th floor of a corporate building in downtown Charlotte with a panoramic view of the city. The secretary, an impeccably dressed middle-aged woman, initially tried to dissuade William from a meeting without an appointment. "Mr. Matthews is very busy today," she said. Without looking up from her computer, "Tell him William Thompson is here to talk about Maria Miller. I'm sure he'll make time." The mention of Maria's name caused an immediate change in the secretary's demeanor. She looked at William with new attention, picked up the phone, and murmured something inaudible. 2 minutes later, William was being led into a luxurious office decorated with mahogany furniture and photographs of Matthews alongside various political figures. Julius Matthews was even more imposing in person than in the photographs. At 65, he stood tall and elegant, with completely white hair combed back and a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His eyes were small and calculating, but his smile was broad and seemingly warm. "Mr. Thompson, what an unexpected pleasure," Matthews said, extending his hand. "Please have a seat. Can I offer you coffee, water?" "No, thank you. This is not a social visit." Matthews' smile faltered slightly. "I imagine it's about your new family situation." "My new family situation is my business. I'm here to talk about your old professional situation." William placed the folder on the table and opened it, revealing the photographs and documents Carol had brought. He carefully watched Matthews's reaction, noticing how the politician paled upon recognizing the materials. "Where did you get this?" Matthews asked, his voice losing its cordial tone. "An inheritance. A very well-documented inheritance left by a very careful person." Matthews leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "And what do you intend to do with these old mementos?" "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" William leaned forward. "I know that you and your associates are trying to get guardianship of the girl in my care. I know you hired fictitious lawyers to intimidate us, and I know you have people watching us. I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. The question is, how far are you willing to go to recover this evidence?" Matthews was silent for a long moment, studying William as if trying to gauge his intentions. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to leave my family alone. I want you to withdraw the guardianship petition. I want you to stop the threats and the surveillance. And in return, these documents disappear forever." Matthews smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. "Do you really think it's that simple?" "It should be. Mr. Thompson, you are dealing with situations that involve a lot of money and many reputations. Some people will not simply accept your conditions because you asked politely. So what kind of people are they?" Matthews got up and walked to the window, watching the city's movement below. "People who have built their lives, their careers, their families on the premise that certain information would never come to light. People who have children, grandchildren, reputations to protect. Like you, like me." Matthews turned to face him. "Do you have any idea what would happen to me if this information became public? Not just to me, but to dozens of other people. Honestly, I don't care. You should care, because some of these people have enough resources and determination to make your life very difficult, regardless of what you do with these documents." The threat was clear, but William forced himself to remain calm. "Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. You want to protect a 4-year-old girl. We want to protect our legitimate interests. There should be a way to reconcile that." "What way?" Matthews returned to his chair and opened a drawer, from which he took his own folder. "We have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "The girl stays with you. We don't contest the adoption. We don't interfere in your lives. We guarantee that you will be left in peace. And in return, you hand over all the documents, recordings, photographs, everything the girl's mother left, and you sign a confidentiality agreement that legally prevents you from discussing anything related to the past activities of the construction company." William examined the papers Matthews had placed on the table. It was a complex contract, full of legal terms he didn't fully understand. "I need to show this to a lawyer." "Of course, but I need an answer by noon tomorrow." "And if I refuse?" Matthews sighed. "Then we'll have to explore other options." "What other options?" "Mr. Thompson, you have a prosperous company, a respected reputation in the community, a comfortable life. It would be a shame if all of that were compromised by association with past scandals." "Are you blackmailing me?" "I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone involved. The girl stays safe and loved with you. We maintain our privacy. Everyone wins." William put the contract in his folder along with Maria's documents. "I'll consider your proposal. I hope you consider it carefully, and I hope you remember that some decisions can't be undone." When William got home, he found Sophie in the garden chatting excitedly with Eleanor about the bird that had returned to visit her. "Uncle Will!" she shouted, running to hug him. "The little bird came back. He ate 3 crumbs from my hand." "That's wonderful," he replied, forcing enthusiasm while his mind still processed the conversation with Matthews. During dinner, Sophie chatted about her plans for the next day, about a book she wanted Eleanor to read to her, about how she was looking forward to starting school. It was hard to believe her innocent life was at the center of such a complex and dangerous plot. After Sophie went to bed, William told Eleanor about his conversation with Matthews. "So he's offering a deal," she said, examining the contract, "a deal that binds us to perpetual silence in exchange for being left alone. And you believe him?" "I don't know. but I also don't know what other options we have. Eleanor placed the contract on the table. William, there's something I need to tell you. What? Today, after you left, I received a strange call. What kind of call? Someone asking about Sophie. They wanted to know details about her routine, what school she would attend, where we usually took her for outings. William's blood ran cold. Did you say anything? Of course not. I hung up immediately, but William, they know a lot about us. They know our schedules, our habits. They know Sophie plays in the garden every afternoon. They're increasing the pressure, and that's not all. Carol called an hour after the strange call. She said someone broke into her apartment in Chicago. They didn't steal anything valuable, but they went through all her papers as if they were looking for something specific. William sat heavily in the armchair. They want to make sure they've recovered all the evidence. What are we going to do? Before William could answer, they heard the sound of Sophie crying in her room. They rushed there and found the girl sitting up in bed, trembling. I had that dream again, she sobbed. The bad men were trying to take me away from you. Eleanor sat on the bed and hugged Sophie. It was just a nightmare, dear, but it felt so real, and in the dream, you couldn't protect me. The child's words hit William like daggers. He looked at Sophie, his niece, the daughter he had chosen to raise, and realized he could no longer live in fear. He couldn't raise a child in an environment where she constantly felt she was in danger. Sophie, he said, sitting on the other side of the bed, want me to tell you a secret? She nodded, wiping her tears. Sometimes adults get scared too. Sometimes we have nightmares too. But do you know what we do when that happens? What? We decide to be braver than our fears. We decide to fight for what is right, even when it's hard. And you'll fight for me? Always. That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep, William made a decision that would change everything. I'm not signing the agreement, he told Eleanor. Are you sure? I'm sure Sophie deserves to grow up knowing the truth about her mother. The families that were harmed deserve justice, and I will not be complicit in a silence that only protects criminals. And the consequences? We'll face them together as a family. The next morning brought immediate consequences of William's decision. At 7 o'clock, before Sophie even woke up, the phone rang. It was Robert, the company accountant, his voice tense and worried. William, I need to warn you. I received a very strange visit last night. What kind of visit? 2 men in suits. They claimed to be IRS auditors, but they didn't present proper identification. They wanted full access to the company's files from the last 20 years. William felt his stomach clench. What did you tell them? That I would need your authorization and official documentation? They didn't like the answer. They said they would be back today with the appropriate documents. Robert, listen carefully. Transfer all the sensitive files to a secure location today, and if these men come back, call me immediately before showing them anything. After hanging up, William found Eleanor in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with mechanical movements that betrayed her anxiety. They've already started, he said, telling her about Robert's call. What are we going to do? First, protect Sophie. Second, document everything that's happening. If they want to play the intimidation game, we'll show them that 2 can play that game. At 9 in the morning, Mr. Fernando Castro, the lawyer brought by Carol, arrived at the house with a grave expression on his face. I received an official notice during the night, he said, handing some documents to William. The guardianship petition has been fast-tracked. We have a hearing next Friday. Friday? That's in 4 days. They claimed urgency, citing possible negligence by the current caregivers. Eleanor leaned over, reading over William's shoulder. Negligence? Based on what? Apparently, someone made an anonymous report claiming the child is being exposed to dangerous situations, that there is suspicious activity at the residence, that strange people frequent the house. William felt anger burn in his chest. They're creating false evidence, and doing it very well. I have to admit the petition is convincing. If I didn't know you personally, I might believe there are legitimate grounds for concern. What can we do to defend ourselves? We need witnesses who can attest to the care you've given Sophie. We need medical documentation showing she is healthy and well cared for. And most importantly, we need to prove that the motivations behind this petition are not the child's well-being. At that moment, Sophie appeared in the room, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Why is everyone talking so quietly?" she asked, with the sharp perception of children. "We're just discussing grown-up things," Eleanor said, going to hug her. "How about we have breakfast together?" But Sophie was not easily distracted. She looked at the documents spread on the table, at the tense expressions of the adults, and her voice became small when she asked, "Are you going to have to give me to someone?" The silence that followed was devastating. William knelt in front of Sophie, holding her small hands. "Sophie, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. There are people who don't know us well and who think you would be better off with another family, but we are going to show them that you are very well with us. And what if they don't believe you? Then we will keep showing them until they do. Promise you won't give me away." William looked into those big, trusting eyes, knowing he couldn't make a promise he might not be able to keep, but also knowing he couldn't break the hope of a child who had already lost so much. "I promise we will fight with all our strength to stay together." For the rest of the morning, while Mr. Castro and Carol organized the legal defense, William received a series of disturbing calls. First was the manager of the bank, where he kept the company's accounts, informing him of a surprise audit that had been requested by competent authorities. Then it was the owner of the building where one of his stores was located, saying he had received complaints about suspicious activities at the establishment. "They're attacking my business," William told Eleanor. "They're trying to pressure me financially. How long can you hold out if things get worse?" "A few months, maybe less if suppliers start cancelling contracts." In the afternoon, while Sophie played in the yard under Eleanor's constant supervision, William received an unexpected visit. It was Casey, his brother, but a version of Casey he hadn't seen in years. Clean, well-dressed, apparently sober. "Hi, William, can we talk?" "About what?" "I thought you made it clear you didn't want to get involved. Things have changed." They sat on the porch where they could talk without Sophie hearing them. "I heard about what's happening," Casey said. "About the legal problems, about the people who are pressuring you, and you came to offer help now, after rejecting your own daughter." Casey lowered his head. "I came because I can't stop thinking about her. Since our conversation, I can't get the image of that girl out of my head. Sophie. Her name is Sophie. Sophie." Casey repeated the name as if tasting its sound. "How is she?" William studied his brother's face, looking for signs of sincerity. "She's fine. She's happy, safe, loved, everything she should have had from birth." "I know. I messed everything up. William, I let fear and selfishness control my decisions, and now I want to help. I want to do the right thing." "How?" Casey pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I stopped drinking. I started therapy. And I filed an official petition to acknowledge paternity." William opened the envelope and found legal documents formalizing what they had always known. Casey was Sophie's biological father. "Why now?" "Because I heard someone is trying to take her from you, and I thought that if I officially recognize that I'm her father, and if I declare that I completely trust the care you are giving her, it could help the case. And you're willing to do that? To publicly admit you have a daughter?" "I am. I can't change the past, William. I can't go back and be the father she deserved from the beginning, but I can try not to be a coward from now on." At that moment, Sophie appeared on the porch, chasing a butterfly that had landed on her favorite flowers. "Uncle Will, look!" A yellow butterfly just like Lucy. She stopped when she noticed Casey. "Hi." Are you Uncle Will's friend? Casey looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time, and William saw tears forming in his eyes. Yes, Casey said in a hoarse voice. I'm a friend of the family. That's cool. Want to see my doll? Her name is Lucy, just like the butterfly. I'd like that very much. William watched Sophie take Casey's hand and lead him to her special corner in the garden. It was a scene that should have happened years ago, but perhaps it could still help heal old wounds. That night, after Sophie slept and Casey left with the promise to be present at the Friday hearing, William and Eleanor received a call that changed everything. It was Mr. Castro, his voice filled with urgency. I got information about who is really behind the guardianship petition, he said. Who? It's not just the Family Protection Institute. There's a group of businessmen and ex-politicians who have informally organized to recover Maria's documents. They found out that the only legal way to access her inheritance is to obtain guardianship over Sophie. And then they will transfer the guardianship to a more suitable family, probably someone from their own group, and the documents will disappear forever. Is that legal? Technically, yes. If they can prove that you are unsuitable as guardians, they can nominate a substitute family of their choice. William sat down heavily. So they don't just want the documents, they want total control over Sophie. Exactly. And here's the most worrying part. I found out they already have a chosen family. A childless couple who are willing to adopt Sophie in exchange for a substantial financial compensation. The revelation was devastating. It wasn't just the documents that were at risk, but Sophie's entire future. What can we do? We have 4 days to build a case so solid that no judge would dare take Sophie away from you, and frankly, I don't know if that will be enough. That night, William stayed awake watching Sophie sleep, knowing that these might be their last nights together as a family. Friday arrived grey and rainy, as if the sky itself reflected the anxiety that gripped the family. William woke up at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep any longer, and found Eleanor already in the kitchen, preparing coffee with trembling hands. "Did you get any sleep?" he asked. "A few hours. And you?" "Enough." At 7, Sophie appeared in the kitchen, quieter than usual. For the past 4 nights she had sensed the growing tension in the house, the whispered conversations, the constant calls. The night before, she had asked directly if today was the day the judges would decide about her. "Uncle Will," she said, climbing into her special chair at the kitchen table, "if I'm very good today, will the judges let me stay with you?" William's heart broke. "Sophie, dear, you are already the best girl in the world. There's nothing you need to do differently." "But what if they don't like me?" Eleanor knelt beside Sophie's chair. "My love, anyone who meets you will love you. The problem isn't you, it was never you." "Then what is the problem?" William chose his words carefully. "Sometimes adults complicate things that should be simple, like 2 people who love you wanting to take care of you, but I choose you. Doesn't that count?" "It does. And today we're going to show that to the judges." At 9 o'clock, the family headed to the Charlotte courthouse. Mr. Castro was waiting for them at the entrance, accompanied by Carol and, to everyone's surprise, Robert, the company accountant. "Robert decided to testify in your favor," Mr. Castro explained. "He has important information about past irregularities that could help the case. And Casey? He's already inside. He arrived an hour ago." The courtroom was smaller than William had imagined, with dark wood walls and an imposing bench where the judge would sit. On the opposite side, he saw the lawyer for the Family Protection Institute, a portly man in an expensive suit, talking with 2 people William didn't recognize, but whom he assumed were the couple interested in adopting Sophie. When Judge Paul H. Matthews entered the room, everyone stood. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious but not unkind expression. William tried to read his intentions, but the magistrate maintained an impenetrable professional neutrality. "We are here," the judge began, to evaluate the guardianship petition for the minor Sophie Grace Miller, currently in the care of William Thompson and his wife, Eleanor Vance Thompson. The Institute's lawyer was the first to speak, presenting arguments about the unsuitability of the current caregivers, citing suspicious activity at the residence, exposure of the minor to potentially dangerous situations, and lack of legitimate family ties. William listened to every word with growing indignation, especially when the lawyer suggested that Sophie would be better served by a structured family without external complications. Then it was Mr. Castro's turn to speak. He began by presenting Robert as a witness. Your Honor, Mr. Robert Davis worked for 15 years as the accountant for Thompson Construction. He can attest to Mr. Thompson's character and the true motivations behind this guardianship petition. Robert stood up, visibly nervous but determined. Your Honor, I have known William Thompson for over 15 years. He is a man of integrity who has always treated employees and clients with respect and dignity. And I can confirm that the people behind this petition have a direct interest in materials that belong to the minor's deceased mother. What kind of materials? The judge asked. Documents proving irregularities committed 20 years ago, involving several companies and authorities of the time. Documents that are legally the property of the minor, but that certain people want to recover to protect their own interests. The Institute's lawyer vehemently protested, but the judge allowed Robert to continue. Your Honor, in recent weeks, Mr. Thompson's company has been targeted by questionable audits. His family has received veiled threats, and people have broken into his property looking for these materials. It is no coincidence that the guardianship petition has arisen at this exact moment. Next, Mr. Castro called Carol to testify about the relationship between Maria and Sophie, about how the deceased mother had specifically expressed a desire for William to care for her daughter. Maria watched the Thompson family for years, Carol said. She knew exactly who William was, knew his character, his integrity. She specifically chose him to be her daughter's protector. Then came the moment that surprised everyone. Mr. Castro called Casey as a witness. Your Honor, I would like to present Casey Thompson, who has something important to declare. Casey stood up, more nervous than Robert had been, but with a determination William had never seen in his brother. Your Honor, I am the biological father of Sophie Grace Miller. A murmur ran through the room. The Institute's lawyer seemed genuinely surprised. For years, Casey continued, I was too cowardly to take on this responsibility. I abandoned Maria when she needed support the most. But now I want to correct my mistakes. And what is your position regarding the minor's current care? The judge asked. I completely trust my brother William and my sister-in-law Eleanor. They have provided my daughter with the love, security, and stability that I was unable to offer. And I formally declare my full support for Sophie's continued care under them. Would you be willing to formally waive your paternal rights in favor of an adoption by the current caregivers? Yes, Your Honor, completely. Finally, Mr. Castro did something no one expected. He asked for Sophie to speak with the judge. Your Honor, the minor is 4 years old, but she is exceptionally articulate for her age. I believe it would be appropriate to hear her perspective. The judge hesitated, but finally agreed. Sophie, can you come up here near me? Sophie stood up bravely and walked to the judge's bench, carrying her doll Lucy. William and Eleanor held each other's hands, anxious. Hi, Mr. Judge, Sophie said in her clear voice. My name is Sophie Grace Miller, but now I'm a little bit of a Thompson too. The judge smiled for the first time during the hearing. Hello, Sophie. Can I ask you a few questions? You can. Are you happy living with Uncle Will and Aunt Eleanor? I'm very happy. They give me yummy food, read stories to me, and never yell at me when I do something wrong. And how do you feel when you think about living with other people? Sophie thought for a moment. Sad. Because Uncle Will and Aunt Eleanor are my family now. And Lucy likes them too, she added, showing the doll. Is there anything else you would like to tell me? Yes. My mommy became a star, but before she did, she told me that good people would take care of me. And they did. So I think my mommy was right. The judge was silent for a long moment, clearly touched by the child's sincerity. Thank you, Sophie. You can go back to your seat. After the final testimonies, the judge retired to deliberate. The wait lasted almost 2 hours, during which William, Eleanor, Sophie, and all their supporters remained in the room, anxious. When the judge returned, his expression was solemn. After careful consideration of all the elements presented, he began, "This court has reached the following conclusions." William held his breath. First, it is clear that the guardianship petition filed by the Family Protection Institute is motivated by interests that have no direct bearing on the well-being of the minor. Second, the evidence presented demonstrates that the minor is receiving adequate, loving and stable care in her current arrangement. William's heart began to race with hope. Third, the expressed wishes of both the biological father and the minor must be considered in this case. Therefore, this court denies the guardianship petition filed by the Family Protection Institute. Furthermore, the judge continued, "I authorize the immediate commencement of the adoption process for the minor by the current caregivers, William Thompson and Eleanor Vance Thompson, based on the formal waiver of paternal rights presented today." The room erupted in restrained joy. Sophie, who had not fully understood the legal terms, asked, "Does this mean I can stay with you?" "Forever," William replied, tears streaming down his face. 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Sophie Grace Thompson, now officially part of the family, played in the garden of the house that had truly become her home. The bird she had fed months ago had brought its entire family, and now several birds visited the yard daily. William had decided to make the documents left by Maria public, but in a controlled and responsible manner, working with authorities to ensure that the families harmed in the past received fair compensation. Julius Matthews and others involved in the corruption schemes were investigated. But William focused more on repairing the damage than on seeking revenge. Casey had kept his promise to change. He remained sober, attended therapy regularly, and was gradually building a relationship with Sophie, not as a father, a role he had voluntarily abdicated, but as a loving uncle who had finally learned to take responsibility. Carol had moved to Charlotte, living in a small apartment near the family, where she had become the grandmother Sophie never had. On the afternoon of that special day, Sophie was drawing in the garden when she ran to William with a paper in her hands. "Daddy Will, look what I drew." It was a drawing of a yellow house surrounded by colorful birds, with 4 figures holding hands in front. William, Eleanor, Sophie, and a female figure she had drawn with wings. "Who is this person with wings?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. "It's Mommy Maria. She's flying free now, but she's still watching over us." William hugged his daughter, because that's what she was now, his daughter by law and by heart, and looked up at the blue Carolina sky. "I think your mother would be very proud of the family we've built together." "I think so too," Sophie said, smiling. "And look, Daddy, the birds are singing our family song." And indeed they were. A symphony of free birds, singing in the garden of a house where a girl had found not just a home, but a family that would love her forever, and where painful secrets of the past had been transformed into hope and justice for the future. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.